Welcome, learners and growers. I'm Danielle Brown, e-commerce specialist at BookPal. We have a terrific workshop planned for you today, but before we jump in, a few quick reminders. As part of our mission to ignite continuous learning and growth, we hope this presentation not only gives you actionable advice you can use for yourself, but also something to share. Have your notepad and pen ready, or your cell phone or tablet for those more technically savvy. We've reserved the last 10 to 15 minutes of this event for a live Q&A, so be sure to post your burning questions and pressing problems in the chat on Zoom or in the comment section on Facebook. To our Zoom attendees, please remember to keep yourself muted during today's presentation, and as always, we'll be sending out the recording to all attendees next week. Now, without further ado, it is my privilege to introduce our esteemed guest, Alexa Shoen. Alexa is a copywriting whiz, a tech startup aficionado, and a jazz vocalist extraordinaire. But this jack of many trades is also notably founder and CEO of ENTRYLEVELBOSS and author of a book by the same name. Today, Alexa will be sharing some critical tips and strategies for navigating the COVID-19 job search. Please join me in welcoming the internet's favorite career coach and a true inspiration, Alexa Shoen.
Oh, it's so lovely to be here. Oh, I'm so happy, and I'm so happy to be doing this with BookPal and for everybody who is in attendance today. Yeah, let's jump into it.
All right, sounds good.
Cool. Okay, so I will share my screen and kind of talk you guys through what I'm going to be chatting about today, but let's make sure that we get into presentation mode, get this nice and official, loading up, boom. Okay, so first of all, like I said, I'm so happy to be speaking to this group of people specifically because I know that we have some job seekers tuning in, but we also have a lot of educators and people who work in career services. And that is a group that is very, very near and dear to my heart. Just earlier this week, the Notre Dame Career Center, which is my alma mater, decided that they were going to do their own accord. I did not bribe them or anything. Entry Level Boss Book Club, where they are personally running book clubs for students to take them through the 9-step entry-level boss process. I'll get into all of this in a second. We've had school districts in Dallas and in California ask if they could buy this book for high schoolers, and even mentors who just are really passionate about kind of paying it forward to the next generation who, have already bought 20 copies and just want to pass them out like candy at meetings, informal coffee meetings where people have to pick your brain. So I hope that you guys find this interesting from that perspective. But what I'm going to kind of walk you through today is some basic sort of tips and tricks, really, really pragmatic stuff, 5 specifically for how to get hired during COVID-19, or what I now like to refer to as our pandemic revolution era, because this year is crazy and it just keeps getting crazier and it's not even halfway over yet. And everybody has opinions about employment when this is all happening. But first, I will do the same thing that I tell all of my job seekers to do and all of the readers of Entry Level Boss, which is to just take a deep breath. Because employment, like I said, is a stressful topic during an era like this. Here's who I am before we jump into anything. Danielle wonderfully introduced me, but I'll walk you through my very, very official biography. So Alexa is the founder and CEO of Entry Level Boss, an online education company. Yes, very exciting. I've pioneered a multi-million-dollar information architecture platform for Facebook. I ran a highly sought-after communication design studio all over in Europe, out of Berlin, Germany. And now I'm hailed as the internet's favorite career coach. And I founded a 9-step methodology for the job search in 2016. I have this very fabulous book. I'm also a critically acclaimed jazz vocalist. And all of this is a little bit hyped up and obnoxious because this is what it felt like in the beginning when I graduated from Notre Dame with an English degree and then a master's in jazz performance because I wanted to be extra employable. Alexa Shoen is unemployed as fuck. Seriously, everybody else is employed except for her. I mean, okay, yes, she has some freelance work, but it's only like 10 hours a week and it doesn't even count. And her career is literally a lost cause at the age of 24. She totally should have studied accounting instead of English. That was so stupid. All the accountants have jobs by now. She literally has no idea what she wants to do with her life. Please find her resume or CV in your inbox. It's definitely there because she has applied to every job on the internet. I want to really highlight for you guys that I wrote this book about the modern job search before all of this was happening. And I wrote it because this feels true for every high school graduate who's not going on to college, everyone who is trying to look for an internship in their, junior year, freshman year, what have you, and everybody importantly who graduates from college without that job secured and lined up, or when they take the internship and it doesn't convert into an offer. I wrote this for that panicking feeling that you get when you are sending out 90 resumes a day and you have no idea what to do next. I could never have predicted that the book would be published in this exact economy, but it has always been really, really difficult to find good work, and it's getting harder. And so if you work in career services, my heart goes out to you because you are not crazy. This is a very, very difficult time to be supporting young students. And so what I wanted to do was kind of create this plan for how to get through that process with fewer tears, frankly. What we're going to go through now quickly is just 5 pragmatic little shifts to kind of give you a taste of the way that I think of the world and the way that I think of employment. We're going to go through targeting industries strategically and understanding where the opportunities are at, organizing your job search in the most effective way possible, hacking your skill set and DIY internships, which is a really hot topic for students, navigating the virtual job search when you can't leave the house, and actually now even when you can, and staying sane and positive when it's really tempting to freak out. And I encourage you to take notes and pass along anything that's helpful to any young students in your own life, or if you're a job seeker, obviously pay extra attention. So shift number 1 that I want to talk about is something that we are seeing happen right now, and we see happen whenever there is any kind of recession or economic trip up or anything like that, which is that if you are paying attention to the media, which we all are, everybody is saying there are no jobs, everything has gone terrible. And yes, this is a really, really, really critical and terrible time for a lot of employment situations. But even in some of the deepest recessions that this country has ever been in, the majority of people are actually still employed. And what we're seeing right now is some really interesting opportunities and ways that you can kind of shift the industries that you're chasing in order to try to make sure that you're chasing jobs that still exist, right? This would be a stupid year to try to get a job in tourism, but what are the opportunities that you have instead? You're going to see a ton of lists like this all over the internet that are very COVID specific because people are at home more often, right? I know, for example, I have bought more spatulas in the last 3 months than I've ever bought in my entire life because I didn't cook as much before this situation came. Like I said, there are going to be losers in this industry as well. And I think that when we are focusing on just the fact that oh my gosh, there's no jobs, everything is terrible, it makes us stop thinking critically about where the opportunities really, really are. And I've had a lot of students come to me and say, can you please tell me, which industries are hot right now and which are still hiring, and basically who still has jobs? I get this question a lot. And if I had a list, or if I had a journalist who had some updated real-time list of exactly the fact that there were 47 jobs available in publishing right now for entry-level people, nobody has that list because the economy is a circus and not a very rigorously calculated spreadsheet. And so the advice that I've been passing on is, please just be flexible and avoid generalizations about how the economy works during a recession. We know right now, for example, that home fitness equipment and Peloton is having the greatest year ever, right? If you think that that's an interesting industry to go into, then why not kind of go and quickly pursue that? Because you're never going to be 100% confident. You're never going to know the whole story. But the best thing that you can do is move quickly on information that's available to you, right? Grocery stores have head offices all over this country. Whole Foods and Trader Joe's are probably hiring in their corporate office. The faster you think of those things and make your own changes and strategically pick the industry, the faster you're going to be getting there kind of before the next person. The next shift that I want to talk you through is something that is the foundation of the 9-step method that I talk about in Entry-Level Boss land. It's step 1 in the Entry-Level Boss book, and it is about how to organize your job search in the most effective way possible, because a lot of times what I see people do is freak out when they need a job, classic, and they say, I just want a job, just any job, any job will do, and they are trying, bless them, to not basically pigeonhole themselves, right? We hear this a lot, especially from college graduates who say, oh, I don't want to limit myself to any opportunities. But actually, the best thing that you can do for your job search is to get really, really specific about exactly what you want. And I walk through this in step 1 in the book. And the way that I teach people to do it is basically play Mad Libs and create their elevator pitch for what kind of job they're looking for. So in the book, I ask you 3 questions, which is what kind of role do you want? What industry do you want to be in? And where do you want to work? Then the thing that I want to teach people about this year specifically, because during recessions, people tend to get more conservative about their hires and they're not sure if they want to spend the money on making sure that people are getting employed, is benefit to the P&L, profit and loss sheet. So basically, how do you help a company to save time or to make money, right? So here's an example of what this looks like. I am looking for professional roles based on my area of expertise in order to help businesses make money or work more efficiently in this very, very specific way. So I am looking for a junior social media marketing job in the Los Angeles area or remote, and I want to write Instagram captions and create lightweight, low-cost Instagram story content in order to turn social fans into first-time customers, right? That would be a perfect way to sort of line this up. Or I'm looking for junior supply chain roles in the high-end alcohol industry in Mexico City, and I specialize in sourcing and managing glassware suppliers so that you don't have your supply chain disrupted by the pandemic. Again, another perfect way to explain time or money and how you can save that. And this one sentence I have found kind of creates this North Star for the job search in a way that few other things can. Shift number 3, and by the way, if I'm kind of going through this really, really quickly, don't worry, we have Q&A at the end, or if you want to interrupt, Danielle has been told that she can pipe in at any time and interrupt me with questions. So if you have questions along the way, I know there's a lot of information at once.
We do have one question about more of the geographical requirements. Have you heard of any industries now loosening those requirements, maybe being more open to remote hires?
Absolutely, yes. This is, of course, really hot in the technology industry specifically. Both Slack and Twitter have said that they're going to start letting people work from wherever. But also, you've got companies like Morgan Stanley where 90% of people are at home, and the CEO has said on calls like, over my dead body, did I ever think that this would happen? I have definitely seen people loosening the restrictions or not having as much of a argument as to why people have to be in the office after this period. I've seen a popular trend, which is that you can still get hired so long as you work in the same time zone, which is something interesting that I think we'll keep seeing. The important question or thing that I always think about with geography, and this is a bit different now that things have gone so remote, but I find so many students who are like, I'm looking for a job in either LA or Milan or London or Sydney, Australia. And, those of us who have been in the working world for longer, and I explain this in the book as well, understand that like a network exists in a geographic region, right? Like if you worked for a competitor down the street and now you work for this other person, like understanding the lay of the land of how an industry works in one city, that's impossible to do in 5 cities at a time. And it's the reason that a lot of people feel really overwhelmed, is because they're just like literally throwing spaghetti at the wall all over the world. Okay, I'll continue on with shift 3. But again, if you guys have more questions, go ahead and interrupt me. Hacking your skill set and creating own DIY internships. This is super important to talk about as educators specifically, because something crazy happened in the global financial crisis, which we all know, which was that basically a ton of people got laid off, and then a ton of mid-weight people applied for roles that were too junior for them. And it created this shift in the economy where all of a sudden you have this sensation of entry-level jobs requiring 1 to 3 years of experience. And you have all these students out there now saying like, how do I get experience that I don't have? Like, don't they understand that I was in college? Hacking your skill set and creating DIY internships is something that I feel really passionate about, because it is basically teaching students to figure out how to teach themselves either during or after their degree programs. When students are going through degrees, which are amazing, incredible ways to learn things, of course, we all know this, but they get really hung up on this concept of it being official, right? Because they're going to get an official degree from an official university and it's accredited and this is all like, checked and I get my diploma at the end. But in the working world, there's not really such thing as an official internship versus unofficial experience. I think a great example is I get students all the time who say, well, I studied graphic design at school, and here's my student portfolio, and I haven't found a graphic design job in 2 years, and I don't know what to do next. And I'm like, have you offered to do graphic design for your church down the street? Like, have you offered to, create an album cover for your friend's band? Sort of these ways to kind of hack and get practical experience, or to create your own DIY internship in a kind of more long structured way. Maybe you're going to take over, running, again, let's use the church example, right? Like Zoom services for church for the elderly for the next 6 months. Like, that's an incredible way to show that you are self-disciplined and self-directed, and really kind of take your sort of creative thinking skill set that you just got with your degree and use it to sort of figure out how you're going to make this leap to get the magical 1 year of experience that is so hard to get in order to get the entry-level job that you're looking for. The exciting thing about this as educators is that we get to kind of tell people, like, you're not going to get permission to go learn after this. You have to give yourself permission. You have to invent your own opportunities at any time without waiting. And I think of that as a really exciting thing and kind of an uplifting way to put it, as opposed to constantly focusing back in on the fact that, that students just don't know what to do next. Shift number 4, networking when you can't leave the house or even when you can. My big takeaway about networking is that it is not just a nice to have. I see way too many students who are going out and sending out just cold emails right and left. And we have done the research on this. Many people have done the research on this. And the studies show that 80% of jobs never even make it online. And we all kind of know this to be true, right? You get hired through personal referrals. It's not necessarily your sister, but it's your sister's boyfriend's sister who knows somebody at that company that you want to work for. Inside of the book, all of part 3 of the Entry-Level Boss method, steps 6, 7, and 8, is called We Network Till We Get Work, trying to teach people the process of how to do this and how to go introduce themselves to either strangers or to other alumni contacts, and really kind of go through that process, because it is really, really scary, but it is also the most efficient path to employment. The cold application thing that I see, where people are sending out just 100 applications a week, I refer to it as the job search junk food diet, because you're just sitting there and you really want to feel productive. And so you're like, maybe if I send out another resume on LinkedIn, like that'll be a thing to do it. When in reality, it's the least efficient way. They're empty carbs. Basically, it's the empty carbs of the job search. And it is my life's work to get people off of that bad diet. It is who you know, but you can know anyone. This is a really important thing that I put into the book, is because a lot of people grow up with the limiting belief, too many people, that because they didn't grow up in the right family and they didn't go to an Ivy League school, it means that they are just all out of luck right from the start. And what is amazing about the internet is that so many things have changed, and networking, even way before COVID, was happening in people's Twitter DMs, or it was happening with people just like finding somebody's email address on the internet and writing a cold email and crossing their fingers. And so keeping that in mind as this kind of, again, like hacking your own skill set, land of opportunity and interesting puzzle to try to solve for, is a really uplifting and exciting note that you can leave people with. Yes, it is scary, but there are all kinds of templates for emails that you can send inside the Entry-Level Boss book. And that has been pretty cool to see, as I'll get people, sending me messages and saying, oh, just so you know, I sent out one of your emails today and it totally worked, and they got back to me. And I'm like, oh, I'm so excited. The reason that I wrote the entire book, and the reason that I am so passionate about this topic and the fact that we run Entry-Level Boss, the business, is because employment is so tied to mental health, and it is so tied to our self-worth and how we feel about ourselves. And it is so easy to get really scared and overwhelmed. And there's something that is not in this presentation, but I want to really sort of poke at as well, because I've seen it happen a lot, especially with people who have been unemployed in this kind of time of duress, is that I see that people always, when they are looking for a new job, they also really want to find out their one true passion and what they really want to do with their life at the same time. They're trying to solve for both of those things at the same time. And what I do with the entry level boss method is just like decouple that a little bit. You don't have to go find your one true dream job. Why don't we find you a job where you enjoy the tasks that you're doing 3 days a week instead of 2 days a week, and kind of slowly over time work your way towards a job that feels really, really fulfilling. One of the most frustrating things about the job search is that it's so outcome based, and it feels like you're failing every single hour up until you get the offer itself, right? Kind of like how it feels like you're like, single every day until all of a sudden you're not. And I love making a lot of bad jokes in the book about Tinder and LinkedIn and how it's so much like dating. But with the job search, the best thing that you can do, and the reason that I've created the structure that I have for going through this process, is you need to break it down and measure progress based on connections and not just on applications, and make little lists and find 20-minute tasks at a time, like follow up on that email, or send a text to this person who was going to introduce me to so-and-so. That is going to be so much more effective than spending 3 hours scrolling through roles you don't want on LinkedIn. It's going to be so much more effective than just staring at your to-do list that says get a job and not knowing what to do next. And the promise that I make to all my readers with Entry Level Boss is, if you keep working this system, you're always going to at least know how to unstick yourself, right? You're not going to get stuck in a dead end of like, I'm unemployed and I don't know what to do. And then the freak out happens and then you are just kind of underwater with your own stress. Everything that I've created is a toolkit for how to constantly get yourself out of that, because it's not just about the resume. It's not just about, the cover letter. It is the mental duress of having to go through this process and put yourself out there. So in summary, because I know this is a lot, target industries strategically, defining your job search by defining your elevator pitch, creating your own destiny by creating your own skill set and internships, networking diligently, daily, and specifically, and then also to just divide this whole process into bite-sized 20-minute chunks in order to always keep moving. This is my book, and one of my favorite reviews, which is said they should hand these out with your diploma at graduations. I am very, very, proud of the fact that, the Notre Dame Career Center, San Jose State, many people across the country are really, really enjoying and loving and understanding and wanting to collaborate with us to get the entry-level boss curriculum into schools, which is pretty freaking cool. And if you want to stay connected with me, please come follow me on Instagram, Alexa Shoen. Entry Level Boss also has an Instagram, or you can drop us a line, hello@entrylevelboss.com, and get in touch with us directly. And there's a picture of my face back when we used to be able to go into public. And yeah, I think from there it's Q&A time. Whew, I'm going to take a sip of water.
Yes, take a breath, take a sip of water. Thank you so much. I think those 5 shifts, they really are applying so many of the lessons in your book to the current time that we're in. And one of the questions was about networking that we got in the chat. And I know in your book, you have this great outline for the kinds of people that you should try to be networking with, and you group them and give different strategies for each segment. So can you maybe give a quick overview of just where the starting point is for something like that?
Yeah. So networking often feels really, really scary to people because you have no idea who to reach out to or what to say, right? And so the first thing to do is break that down into like types of people you're going to be chatting to. And so the 3 groups are steps 6, 7, and 8. As you mentioned, 6 is the people that you know. So your sister's boyfriend's sister, or alumni from your university, or a family friend connection, or also people that you just have something in common with, right? Like, I don't know, maybe somebody in your like sausage dog Instagram network, but people who know you and know your name. And I give explanations of kind of how to go and approach those people informally, but also you're asking for professional favors from personal contacts and how to approach that. Step 7 is based on what I like to call the ancient entry-level boss proverb, which is people cannot hire me if they do not know I exist. So it's about going out to direct employers and introducing yourself and not hounding them or anything, but saying, hey, I really, really, really want this job. You know, this is me. Like, I want to come work for you, which is definitely a bit of a, I think, magic sauce, because so many people are sending out cold applications that it's hard on the employer side for people to understand who actually wants to work for them versus who just clicked and sent an application and copy and pasted things, right? And then my third group, step number 8, is what I call the magical sparks. And this is kind of serendipity set in motion, right? And I think a great example of magical spark networking is something that so many students would benefit from. I was just talking to a woman yesterday who has done a couple internships in visual merchandising, for example. And I said, do you know any visual merchandisers? And she was like, no, I don't. And I was like, why don't we go and find one on the internet, and then we can talk to them and have them gut check whether or not your portfolio is any good. And going out and finding connections in industry, not necessarily like someone who's going to give you the job, but somebody who can act as your advocate and also can potentially direct you onto industry connections that you never would have found on your own.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I think that's a perfect overview, but there is so much more information and great examples in the book. So definitely check it out if you want more advice on the networking side. Another question that I have is, you know, so much of what you teach is kind of deconstructing what we may have been told by college counselors, parents, professors, or other well-meaning professional adults. Where did this perspective come from? Was it just your own frustrations or something from the newsletter or just hearing other people's frustrations?
Okay, I think this is time to, and I say it this way in the book too, but I'll address the big E word, I call it entitlement, right? And we talk a lot about millennials and Gen Z being entitled. And I won't say they're not. I mean, sometimes some of them are. But one of the first chapters in the book, which is kind of what you're referring to, is 14 things I used to believe about how employment works and all the things I now know to be true instead. And what it is really is what entitlement actually is so many times is people's brain having to change from the academic mindset of, I checked all these boxes, I did everything right, where's my diploma, where's my gold star, where's my Spanish 201 class now that I finished Spanish 101. It's a very structured way of going through and kind of creating a reward system for people, and it makes sense for education. But then you get out into the real world, and I see so many recent graduates just so frustrated because nobody ever really articulated to them, and nobody articulated to me, that has all just like come to an end. You know, people kind of joke about like, oh, welcome to the real world, kid. And really what Entry Level Boss is all of the advice that I wish that someone could have articulated to me. You know, it's very much so like a do what you want for like your younger self, right? And it's not that people were telling me lies or being malicious or anything, but so much has changed since the global financial crisis. So much has changed since the internet. So much has changed just sort of in the economy over the last 20 to 25 years that people who are a lot, you know, I don't know, further down the line in their careers, they don't really know what it's like to have to make this leap, for example, over the like 1 to 3 years of experience to get an entry-level job, because a lot of training modules have gone away at big companies and things like that. And so I think all this experience just came from, it's like I say in the book, which is like the best offer I can give you for why you should trust me is because I went through all my own trial and error and I wrote it down.
That's fair. I really appreciated that approach, that you were saying you went through all of the mistakes and the trial and error so that you can prevent other people from doing that same thing and having those experiences. So learn from my experience first. Speaking of refreshing hot takes that you may have had in the book, you had a really great comment about cover letters, and even I felt convicted by the things you were poking fun at, the formal language and the traditional letter styles and everything, but you had really good examples of how to fix that. Do you think that cover letters will ever go away completely, or are they going to have a dramatic shift the way that you kind of advise in the book?
I sure hope so. I think the cover letter is the reason that it is so antiquated, and I explain this in the book as well, is like a cover letter was a pre-internet physical sheet of paper that you put on top of a resume, another physical sheet of paper, and then you send it off in the mail based on a classified ad, and then you cross your finger. And it makes sense. Like historically, a cover letter was the only way that you had to explain yourself because people couldn't Google you. They didn't see your LinkedIn. Like it was before the internet. And so it made sense. And for some reason, we just have kind of continued to include it in this new way. I think that the concept of a cover letter, which is, can you please just tell me why you want this job and who you are, makes sense because there's so much room for misinterpretation on resumes, especially ones that are done without reading the entry-level boss methodology and templates. And so, that's why I focus so much on the concept of like networking emails, but more importantly, defining that elevator pitch that I spoke about. Because at the end of the day, that's what a cover letter really should be, is like, here's who I am, here's what I want, here's what I'm all about. But yeah, the way they're done right now is terrible and a waste of time, usually.
I will say the one improvement I've seen at least is sometimes they ask specifically for that cover letter to go right in the email rather than have it be a separate attachment, which is nice. But I love the templates that you included in the book because you really do modernize them and make it more fresh and clear sounding so that we don't have to be these other professional people in order to explain who we are.
Yeah, that's what I always say is like, no human on this planet like grew up speaking native corporate jargon. Like, like we all like write with these kind of weird like third person like I'm like, if you don't know what this says, no one else knows what this says either. Like you're just sending this over to be read by some 29-year-old recruiter who's like trying to figure out what they're having for dinner that night. And I think that's actually a really interesting thing with the educator conversation specifically, and might be interesting to people who are on this call, is a big misconception that I see a lot is that job seekers assume, especially young job seekers, assume that a recruiter is going to look at their resume and cover letter the same way that a professor would grade their paper. Like really truly like dig into it and kind of go through it line by line and see like, try to basically see good intent and look at it. And what I always say on the other side is like, it's not true. And teaching people how to write for this style of somebody's going to be skimming through this and you need to kind of make a splash and sort of give them your key argument really quickly is, a complicated mental framework to change.
Right. One of the shifts that you talked about, and you talk about it a lot in the book too, is upskilling yourself and creating your own opportunities and finding ways to get that unofficial experience without having to call it that. And I really love this message and this takeaway because at BookPal, we try to create a community of lifelong learners that are constantly upskilling themselves and by reading. And you recommend also using YouTube, Skillshare, Udemy, LinkedIn Learning. What advice would you have for someone who isn't sure what skill they should actually research or learn next?
The thing that I kind of explain in the book and I see all too often with people is that when they want to upskill, they overcorrect. And we've all seen it with people saying it's two things always, right? I'm going to learn coding and I'm going to learn like Mandarin, right? And I'm like, these are two like giant topics, and coding, I come from a background at Facebook in technology, not a coder myself, but working in software design. And so to learn coding it's like saying you're going to learn marketing. It is such a vague topic that it really truly is kind of, number one, meaningless and impossible to learn coding. You could learn HTML, you could learn how to upload stuff onto a WordPress backend system, you could learn Python or like these very, very specific things. But outside of that, just kind of like, you don't have to learn a new skill set. The thing that I've been telling people specifically through this era is, I'm like, what is the one thing that you could learn in order to become a comically compelling version of yourself? And so a great example of that is if you've worked in HR your entire career, and there just like always has been two different softwares that people use in HR, right? They use A or B, and you've only worked at companies that use A. Could you teach yourself or take a class, on software B, so that all of a sudden when you go into your next interview, you're like, yeah, I know either system. Like, you can't throw me because I already taught it to myself. That is the kind of just sort of baby way to sort of up level all the time. And you're just like, no, now I know not everything, but like, pick a tiny thing that you always were a little bit behind in at your last job and do that instead.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion, because even if you're in a current industry, there are so many little facets and platforms and programs that you can still learn to just continue broadening that skill level.
Absolutely.
Now, so much of your advice in the book drills down to effective communication and learning to sell yourself, whether it's through a LinkedIn bio or an email. What would you say is the biggest challenge for job seekers learning to reshape the way they communicate about themselves?
Every job seeker I talk to, from community college dropouts to Facebook data scientists, thinks that they are the most unhireable person on the planet. And everybody wants to immediately come to me and tell me all the reasons why their professional narrative is too complicated, it doesn't make any sense, and they've screwed it up. And that is the thing that is holding people back, is there is so much shame and frustration associated with kind of like living up to the ideal body type, or living up to the ideal, parenting method or whatever. People have that same thing about like, oh, well, here's where my career went wrong, and then it's all been downhill from here, and it's really complicated, you see. And I'm like, it's not, but so many times it takes, being able to clear your own brain. And that's why I think it's great to, read through the Entry Level Boss book as a class, or to kind of work with a third party, whether that's me as a career coach, or, with educators who are learning this curriculum, because it's hard to do for ourselves. It's hard to go out and sell yourself. But there are ways to kind of strip it back and, repackage your narrative. People always treat their resume as if it's like a confessional document of like, here's everything I've ever done, I'm so sorry that it's not enough. And I'm like, actually, like, people don't need your whole life story, man. like let's think about this more like a dating profile, or like a first date of, here's who I am and here's what I'm about. But it's really hard for people to do. And like I said, it doesn't matter how talented or impressive their resume is. I see everybody struggle with it.
Right. Now, you have a really great example of something that you shouldn't do in the book. You had a real life example where a friend of a friend approached you in a really terrible way. But are there other things that you found, or you get, write-ins about, that our viewers should specifically avoid doing?
Maybe that'll be the next book.
Yes.
I mean, I think that the biggest, I see people struggle with so much stuff, but I really do. It's every time people are like, no, wait, I'm the worst you've ever seen. And I'm like, no, honey, I've seen worse. The biggest thing I think I see people struggle with is not pausing to decide where they want to work. And actually, this will also be really interesting for people on the call, is I wish that people approached, or I teach people to approach the job search more like the college admissions process, which we have a great, framework for in the US, right? Which is like, I'm going to apply to 10 to 15 schools, and here's my safety schools, and here's my reach schools. And people really think about that, and they're like, I'm going to look so good in green, and that's why I want to go to Oregon. And, I already know what kind of meals they serve at the cafeteria. And yet in their working life, they randomly will apply to some employer where like, they don't know where the office is. They don't even remember what the employer does. Like, again, it's this job search junk food diet of just scrolling through the internet, being like, click, 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 like, don't even remember the name of the company. They'll tell me if I get it. And I'm like, why are you going to spend 40 hours a week at the name of a company you don't remember? And so again, it's those three questions that I described of like, tell me, where you want to work, in like what industry and in what role. But importantly, what that does is that creates a search radius for if I want to work in social media, in fashion, in the Austin, Texas area, there are only so many fashion companies in Austin, Texas. And now you can actually go out and name them the way that you could name colleges that you want to apply to. And I see way, way, way too many people just race ahead to just be like, just a job, any job.
Yeah, I love your Mad Libs approach to that pitch, and I guess setting your goals for yourself in that way. And location is a huge part of it, and narrowing it down. Right now, I think it can be even more challenging, maybe, to approach the idea of relocating. But you've done it multiple times throughout your experience. So what's some advice you could give someone right now kind of looking for opportunities in a new location?
Unfortunately, a lot of companies that may have in the past paid to relocate, and I mean in the past, like 15 years ago, since the global financial crisis, have not ever paid money to relocate a junior employee. And I think that it is a really important thing to talk about because I see too many heartbreaking situations of people being like, I'm in Kansas City, I've applied for 400 jobs in New York. And I'm like, can you afford a plane ticket to go to New York, and meet these people in person? And they say no. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, no problem. Like, we're going to New York 18 months from now, but right now we're going to get a job in Kansas City so we can start paying money. And kind of, I think people basically feel like relocating is going to be easier than it seems. And so I think that's an important thing to talk about with people. And I have always relocated, with the luxury of having some savings in order to actually physically get myself to a new place. But there's another really good piece of it with relocation advice, which is I basically always just tell people like, fake it till you make it. Because again, we'll use New York as an example. People will go and start networking in New York, but they'll say, I'm thinking of moving to New York. And as soon as you say, I'm thinking of moving to New York, you've been scratched out of the race because they cannot afford to invest the time in you and interview you. And then you're going to get cold feet at the last minute and be like, actually, I love Kansas City. And so the way that I teach people to approach it and the way that I have done it myself in the past when I've moved to various different cities is I am moving to New York. I'm going to be in town 6 weeks from now taking meetings. And, and basically like, it doesn't matter if you don't have the first meeting yet, but all of a sudden you've sort of reverse engineered, like people know that you have real intention for it. And I give some examples of that in the book, but yeah, relocation is harder than people think it is.
I could imagine. That's always been a scary idea for me, but kudos to those of you who do it successfully, yourself included. So that about wraps up for our Q&A portion of today's event. And we are actually doing a giveaway of 3 signed copies of Alexa's book, Entry Level Boss. So I would like to announce our winners for that giveaway are Allison Noonan, Ryan Gordy, and Susan Munkin. We will reach out for your mailing address, but congratulations on getting a signed copy, which will be the first for Alexa.
Yes, the first time I've signed a book. I'm very excited.
All right. And with that, I just want to say another thank you to you, Alexa, for being so wonderful today and giving so much advice. I know this is going to be crucially valuable for so many of our viewers today, as well as viewers of the recording after the fact. And we hope to work with you more in the future. So thank you for sharing your insights with the BookPal audience, and thank you to those of you who were able to attend this webinar live or who are watching this recorded. If you haven't read it already, I highly recommend Alexa's book, Entry Level Boss. It's perfect for high school and college graduates, anyone currently on the job hunt, full-time employees dissatisfied with their roles, or simply those of us who need that extra push to take our careers to the next level. To purchase 25 copies or more of Entry Level Boss for your school, book club, or organization, visit book-pal.com. And if you want to continue your educational journey with BookPal, be sure to join our Homeroom Facebook group, where we share helpful tips, resources, and book recommendations for students, parents, and educators. And be sure to sign up for the BookPal email newsletter to make sure you're the first to know about future author chats and other events. We'll be continuing our regular Author Connect chat series next Tuesday, June 23rd, with Susan Fowler. She's the author of Master Your Motivation and will be sharing some great personal productivity and motivational tips. You can reserve your free spot for that event on our website. And from all of us here at BookPal, we hope you've enjoyed this presentation. Keep reading, keep learning, and keep growing. Thanks for watching, and thanks again to Alexa.
Thanks, everybody. See you next time.